Let's venture back into the world of literature and look at some famous authors and how they used fountain pens to maximize their creativity to find some inspiration that you can use as well. Let's start with the incredible Jack Kerouac. The only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved. Desirous of everything at the same time. The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles, exploding like spiders across the stars, and in the middle you see the blue center light pop, and everyone goes, ah. Lowell, Massachusetts' own Jack Kerouac wrote those words to a jazz beat in On the Road, which was published in 1957. On the Road chronicles Kerouac's adventures, hitchhiking across the country with a mad group of friends in post-war America, as the country was still struggling and the beginning of the big investment was just starting. Kerouac was looking for some real honest experience and connection in the beginning of one of the first true modern counterculture movements, the beatniks. It's just an amazing time full of a lot of energy, music, and incredible rhythmic writing. Kerouac wrote On the Road in an interesting style. He used a typewriter with an actual roll of paper fed into it so that he wouldn't have to stop to change pages. He wanted that continual flow, and he sat at his chair and wrote it in a frenzy over a few weeks. Now, it's a bit of a myth that he didn't revise. He did do revisions, but the original scroll is still there. You can still see his writing process in it. Jack Kerouac pioneered a rhythmic writing style of intense adjective-laden prose arranged in polysyllabic staccato sentences that sometimes ranged and meandered like the rivers beside the newly paved highways. Beat poetry was the moniker, but he considered himself just a writer. Kerouac celebrated the joy of wandering and this longing for connection and friendship that was always tinged with sadness and loss, giving it a profound resonance and emotional intensity. Although Kerouac didn't use a fountain pen to write his novels, he did use it for his regular tasks, for writing notes, probably for writing poetry. And in a very interesting twist here, we actually can see one of the fountain pens that Kerouac used. It's very rare when you can tie a writer directly to one of their pens. Now, it doesn't seem to have any kind of maker's mark, but it's very much one of those mid-century marbled fountain pens with what appears to be a very interesting and smooth nib, the kind you would find on a Watchman or a Wall or an Oxford in those days. I would love to try this fountain pen out, but I guess I'll just have to be happy with the photos. The nib says it's silver palladium alloy, U.S.A., and evidently these types of nibs were used on vintage Esterbrook and Wherever pens. But in those days, many pen makers would make pens for department stores, so they were private label. So it doesn't necessarily have those sort of markings. But still, this fountain pen is a solid choice. It was probably borrowed from William S. Burroughs and completely forgotten. Probably used to scribble verse on the back of a napkin in some diner in Denver, Colorado, or to scribble script while Neil was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway in Big Sur. We'll probably never know, and maybe it's a little better this way. Kerouac was writing at a time before the great homogenization that happened in the 1980s, which pretty much made every suburb of America look the same. His America was at a crossroads, deciding what it wanted to be, and Kerouac was firmly on the side of freedom. The next writer I'd like to look at is one of my personal favorites. This is Donna Tartt. Donna Tartt is a very enigmatic writer who disappears for years at a time writing her books and rarely does interviews or spends much time in public. But when she does, she cuts a very interesting figure. She has her own aesthetic that you would not be out of line calling dark academia. And this is telling because she wrote one of the books that actually led to the dark academic movement, and that is The Secret History, one of my personal favorite books. Donna Tartt adapted her experiences at Bennington College into this incredibly epic Gothic novel of ritual, murder, studies, academia, friends and frenemies in this incredible mix. She is so adept at writing really horrible people doing terrible things, but in such an engrossing and affecting way. These characters haunt you for weeks after closing the book, and that is a very effective writing technique. Now, within The Secret History, Montblanc pens make a very large cameo, and more specifically the 149. It is certainly a highlight for any fountain pen lover to find that reference in there. Guess what? He continued to Frances. Henry bought himself a Montblanc pen. Really? Said Frances. Bunny nodded at the cup of sleek black pens that sat on Julian's desk. I told him he better be careful, or Julian will think he stole it. He was with me when I bought it, said Henry, without looking up from his book. How much are those things worth anyway? Said Bunny. No answer. Come on, how much? $300 a pop? He leaned all of his considerable weight against the table. I remember when you used to say how ugly they were. You used to say you'd never write with a thing in your life but a straight pen, right? Silence. I love when fountain pens are used as a plot device. And here we can see that the teacher, Julian, this very enigmatic and interesting guy who teaches Greek studies and more specifically the Bacchae, to these students is starting to affect them deeply, where things they swore they'd never do, they're starting to do. And it's encapsulated in this one student's purchase of a Montblanc 149. Pretty interesting stuff. It is very well documented that Donna Tartt writes with colored pencils and uses the various colors for her revisions and additions and edits. However, she also writes with a fountain pen and does it in a very engrossing, messy, charming, and disarmingly way. Her own quote says, I have a particular sweater that I like to wear, and I have a little cup that I drink tea out of. I write with a pen, not with a computer. I always come out of my office at the end of the day with ink-stained fingers, literally, and sometimes with ink-stained clothes. I love to use fountain pens, but I'm very messy with them, unfortunately. Now, we don't know which fountain pen she uses specifically. I looked at a lot of photographs and read a lot of articles about her, and I couldn't tie her to a very specific pen. However, with the Montblanc 149 making such a big impression in The Secret History, I'd at least like to think that it's some sort of Montblanc, perhaps that one or another pen that she uses for her own personal writing and creativity. But then, sometimes it's just a plot device. Okay, this is where we get very, very personal. The next writer I'd like to share with you is Sylvia Plath. Now, Sylvia Plath is one of those writers that's so deeply affecting when you read her work. Few writers have just laid bare their inner turmoil, their fight with the void and with darkness, their struggles for intimacy and connection. It's all there in Sylvia Plath, and it's just stunning prose and poetry that's so moving and so deeply affecting. Sylvia Plath is most well known for the Colossus and Ariel, two poetry collection books, and for her one semi-autobiographical novel, the bell jar, which appears to be a way for her to work out her struggles with fitting into the workplace, with trying to really excel there at that time, with her working through her mental illness, and with trying to have a healthy and fulfilling relationship. Although the exact model of fountain pen that Sylvia Plath used is unknown, she was known for using sleek Schaefer pens, so I imagine it was some sort of snorkel pen from that era, which is a perfect pen. It's very free-flowing and expressive and just wonderful to use, so I imagine a young, passionate poet jotting down quick verses would use a pen like this for its flowing, beautiful nature. It would not hold up any of your thoughts and would help get them down onto the page as quickly as possible. They were absolutely brilliant pens and so much fun to write with. Every time I pick up my vintage Schaefer, I think of her. Sylvia Plath, of course, was also in one of the most infamous literary marriages since Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald with the poet Ted Hughes. And much has been said about this. And you can see where many of her struggles derived from. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband, and a happy home, and children. And another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor. And another fig was E.G., the amazing editor. And another fig was Europe, and Africa and South America. And another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila, and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. Another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. Sylvia Plath fought a brave battle against the void and lost. But she left behind a stunning testimony to her humanity, her wit, her creativity that will live on, especially with me. So for many of the authors that I look at, it's difficult to tie them to specific pen models, but that is not the case with the next gentleman we're going to discuss. So now I'd like to speak about Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, author, and presenter, who has done quite a bit on his own to popularize fountain pens around the world, which is absolutely brilliant. So it's a joy to talk about him, his work, and his fountain pens. Mr. deGrasse Tyson is the author of many books, including one of my favorites, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. He is also the presenter of the Star Talk podcast and the Cosmos television series. And he shows up in media, on news channels, and pretty much anywhere and everywhere whenever anyone needs a perspective from a galactic point of view, always setting a very logical, interesting, and compelling argument. He's very reassuring, except when he's talking about the possibility of an asteroid hitting the Earth. That's not so reassuring. So considering that he is an astrophysicist, it's not surprising that many of his fountain pens have space themes. He also appears to like very large pens. The Pelikan M1000 is a favorite of his. He also loves to use very expressive, wet flowing nibs, even nibs like a left oblique in his right hand, which must write very interestingly. I actually have a left oblique nib and I haven't been very successful with it, but after doing the research for this piece, I think I'll break it out again and give it a try. He likes pens that have an enormous ink capacity. He likes to match his inks to the color of his pens, and he is a poster. He loves interesting, wet, broad nibs that draw dramatic lines, like the paths of comets across the skies. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a wonderful tour guide of our universe, distilling complex theories, descriptions of natural forces, and profound ideas into a breezy, conversational manner that's easy to understand and perhaps more importantly, inspiring. He is a gentle hand pointing the way to the stars, inviting your dreams to rise to the expanse of the universe. So, what do you think about the authors that we spoke about today? Is there someone else you'd like to see in a future edition of this series? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and if you've reached this point, please subscribe. I'd love to have you on this journey with us. And if you want to support this channel even more, join, become a member. I'd love to have you behind the scenes and to see what's going on there. So I make new videos all the time, so I can promise you we will see each other again very soon, further up the road. So take care.